Do your students ask a lot of questions during science? Do they have a hard time understanding concepts, vocabulary, or the big idea when it comes to science? Well, my students do, and over the years, after teaching 20 plus years, I've learned different methods that I can use with my students to move them through critical thinking skills and understanding. There's no magic to it. It's actually, guys, hard work and understanding methods that have been around for a while. As an educator, you know that methods come and go. We have different strategies that come and go in reading, in social studies, in all of our other topics like math. And even in science, we have different methods that come and go. But there are some things that we need to hold on to as educators that we know that works best for our students. I have learned over the years, in order for me to get my students to have high achievement, to have growth, to be engaged in science, to understand science, and to remember the concepts, that I like to use the model inquiry-based learning. I know you've heard this before, so before you click that button and say, I've tried that, it doesn't work, well, hear me out, because I want to tell you today about the benefits of inquiry learning and the different types of inquiry-based learning that you can choose from and use in your classroom. Sometimes when we think of inquiry-based learning, we think, oh, okay, let's let the student come up with the question and everybody come up with a different question and they just explore. Well, most teachers, if you're like me, we feel out of control and we feel like we're not going to meet the standards and they're not going to get the concepts that we really want them to learn, which I completely agree. That's why I'm going to tell you the different styles of inquiry-based learning that you can select from and use with your students. If you want to hear more, then stay tuned for this video. With inquiry-based learning, as the teacher, you begin to focus on moving your students into critical thinking skills, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating as they work through the question and begin to investigate it to solve the problem. While students, they look at the question, whether they come up with it or you as the teacher come up with it, they have an opportunity to investigate the question. They can do this through research. They can do it through hands-on learning. They can do this through even you giving them background knowledge. There's no one particular way that you can move your students into critical thinking skills and understanding the concepts. It takes a variety of things to help students to remember and to learn concepts that you are teaching. So even if you are teaching, you want them to learn vocabulary in a particular science lesson, even the hands-on investigation reinforces the vocabulary that you are teaching. So when you're using inquiry-based learning, you are moving your kids forward and higher thinking skills, whatever level they are on. If you've been around my channel for a while, you know that I have several videos that show experiments. And in those experiments, I always have a question and a plan for students to investigate and to come up with a conclusion. I like using the scientific method in my videos when appropriate, and I also like to use the 5E learning model in my videos. And this is another way to engage the students and to enable them to process and learn the information and be able to conduct the investigation even after they see me conducting. So that leads us to the different types of the learning-based model. First, there's confirmation. Teachers give the question and the answer and the method to the investigation. That means that you give an open-ended question, you solve that question giving them the answer, but then you turn around and let students investigate it themselves to find the answer also, so that they can do it hands-on and see for themselves and get their own results. In my video on Alka-Seltzer rate, I demonstrated the experiment and showed the students the rate of the Alka-Seltzer in hot water, room temperature water, and cold water. I gave them the question, and then the students did their own investigation and came up with their own results. Even though they knew the answer, by doing it hands-on, it helped them to use their critical thinking skills and to begin to understand it a little bit more, because they were able to observe and do it themselves and see what would happen. The structured model, as the teacher, you will give an open-ended question and you will give students the means to investigate it. In other words, you're going to set the experiment up for them. In my video, The Penny Drop, I walked the students through the scientific method and I gave them the question. The question was, how many drops of water could a penny hold? And then the students, they had their data sheet to collect the information, and they would come up with the conclusion after doing 3 trials how many drops of water a penny would hold. And so the investigation is set up for them. All they have to do is conduct the investigation. I did not give them the answer, but I did give them the background information that they needed. I also gave them an opportunity to conduct the investigation, and when they were through, they wrote their conclusion and presented it to the classroom. A lot of times I like to use this one when doing science experiments to help my students understand and concepts that I would like to reinforce with them. The next model to use with the students could be the guided model. With the guided model, you actually guide them. You give them that open-ended question, and then you give them the guidance to investigate, giving them the support that they need. Now, when I did the elephant toothpaste video, as you see, I actually did the experiment, but at the end, I came back with 2 different questions that they could select from in a group. And then they designed their own experiment and conducted the investigation, came up with their conclusion, and presented their results to the class. You could have used the same investigation, hands-on investigation, the elephant toothpaste, and you could take it and use it with the other 2 models also. But when I created this one, I wanted to use this particular model. So you see, there's no one particular model that I'm stuck on, but I do like to do various things with my students that I think is appropriate for the students that I teach. And as an educator, that is as your job to select and decide and design in your lessons which learning model is appropriate for your students, your classroom, whether you're doing virtual or whether you're doing in person. Lastly, there's the open-ended model. This is the one where you're just going to give your students support and time. That means that you're going to give them time in the classroom to come up with a question, to research it, to investigate it. As a support person, you will provide, web links that they may need. You may have to provide materials that they need, depending on what they're investigating. And if it's something that they don't have to do a science experiment with, then you provide the support. A lot of people like to use this during Genius Hour. And the kids can select a topic, whether it's snakes or some type of animal, whether it's earthquakes, volcanoes, and they just want to learn something more, but they develop a question because their little minds are going and they want to inquire. Well, you would support them. So that means that in your classroom, every student may have a different topic. So you would have to select a time where you will give your students time and space and the support that they need in order for them to come up with a conclusion, to come up with answers. So, what are the benefits of all this? Besides getting our students to have critical thinking skills and understanding, well, that's saying a lot, but there are actually other benefits that students will receive, and as you as the teacher will receive from using this learning model. I actually love the inquiry-based learning model. It actually helps me to relax because it's my way of learning. I learn better by hands-on, by auditorial, by seeing, by doing, and so it really fits my personal style. And even if it doesn't fit your personal style, sometimes we have to come out of our comfort box because remember, in education, it's all about student impact. How we impact their achievement, how we impact their lives, how we impact their growth and their learning. So really think about it when you look at the different types of benefits that I'm going to explain and see how you can use the inquiry learning-based model with your students. One, it actually promotes growth mindset, believe it or not, because students enjoy learning this way and developing their own questions and solving questions and problems, and because they're so engaged in it, they begin to feel good about themselves. They begin to feel good that they can do this, that they're learning something new. They're not at the point anymore where they're saying, well, I've got to do this because my teacher told me to, or I've got to do well because my parents said I have to make an A or a B. They just begin to enjoy it, and they're not even thinking about grades. They're just learning, and that's the whole purpose of this. We just want them to just dive in or delve in and just learn and enjoy the learning process without holding, something over them that, you've got to get a grade, you have to do this. Now, I will say that with inquiry-based learning, it does get noisy. It's not going to be a quiet room. Students are going to talk to each other because that's what kids do. Now, they're not going to get chaotic and out of hand because you have classroom management already in place. But don't expect it to be a quiet room. I can just tell you that. And sometimes it will begin to work your nerves if you are not prepared. And so you can go back and look at my other video on classroom management and procedures in the classroom, and it gives you a lot of tips and advice on how to set up your classroom and prepare for a science experiment so that you're not having that problem. But with inquiry based, it does benefit. It becomes an intrinsic reward instead of the reward of, oh, what am I going to get? They're not asking that because they've got what they wanted. They learned something new and they enjoyed the learning process. That to me is a benefit in itself. That other benefit, it outweighs all the other benefits. That's why I said that one first. Another benefit is that it can be used with almost all students, and of course I know as an educator we can't do this with all students, but the majority we can. It doesn't even matter what level they're on, because as the teacher you can decide at what pace you want to do this. And after I've given you the different types of inquiry-based methods, you can decide which one you want to use that's going to fit your students. You can decide if you want to put them in groups or if you want it independently, or even if you want to do something whole group. But the point is that you're helping them to inquire, to learn, and to develop those critical thinking skills by the questions you're asking them and by the questions they're asking each other also. One of the things I love when I was teaching in fourth grade in the general classroom, and because I had a larger group of students, was to walk around, and I would have students in groups of 4, and I would have a high average, maybe not low, but a student who needed the extra help. And it would just always amaze me. The student that you think would not be asking the questions would be that student. And they would be so excited because they were figuring out things without me standing at the board teaching them. And students would just ask each other questions or ask me questions, and then I would always say, well, what do you think? Because remember, I told you with science, or the way my approach to teaching is that I'm the guide on the side. I'm the facilitator. I walk around and assist and support, but my students actually get to do the hands-on learning themselves, and that helps them to remember the concepts. So that goes back to another benefit is with inquiry-based learning, concepts are being reinforced. If you didn't see my video on neurons, go back and watch that video. I teach the students about the neurons, and then I have them make a neuron, but when they finish with it, they have to actually go through the process of saying how the messages are sent from one neuron to the next. And that helped them to learn the parts of the neuron. They didn't have to write the definition down. They knew those parts and can tell you even now how the neuron works. They understand how the brain functions. So those are some benefits. There are many more benefits that you could come up with, and that you've probably seen if you've used this model. Let me know in the comments below if you use the inquiry-based learning model or some models similar to that. I'm interested in, what type of activities are you doing with your students when you use this model? Are you using it in, social studies or in some way in reading? Because it can be done in other subject areas. I lean towards science because, of course, that's the area that I focus on. But there are other areas that you can use this model with. I have one tip that I would like to share with you when it comes to inquiry-based learning. Don't throw everything else out, other methods that you use. Those methods are just as important in teaching our students. Continue to build background information, whether you have them research it or whether you give them the background information, whether you use a textbook. Those things are perfectly fine. If you use magazines or something, researching on the internet or showing a PowerPoint, those things are great. Don't throw that away. Keep using it. Keep teaching your students vocabulary because they need to develop the vocabulary skills. However you use it and implement it, ways that you want them to learn it, keep doing that. That's not to say we're going to stop everything else and drop it and we're just going to run with inquiry-based learning and not do anything else. That's not what I'm saying, because your style of teaching is different from everyone else, and you have to feel comfortable with what you're doing with your students. Also, not only to build background information and to continue vocabulary, I want you to remember you are their support system. You are their guide on the side. You are the one making the decision. And when you make that decision, whether good or bad, you're going to have student impact. And you want to have a great impact on students' achievement, engagement, and learning. School can be fun. School is a place where we want kids to come and become scholars. That means always wanting to learn or having a desire to learn. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you gleaned some information that you can use. I hope that you will, go back and watch it again and see which of these model types that you would like to use in your classroom Or just compare and see which ones you already are using. I'm pretty sure you are. You probably just never even thought about it to say, oh, I'm using the inquiry-based model. You just know that you're just doing great teaching as you always do and never thought about anything else. Well, I appreciate you coming by. Remember, if you're new to my channel or if you've been here before and you haven't subscribed, click that subscribe button and click the notification bell so that you will continue to get uploads. Thank you and have a wonderful and blessed day.